Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deneen Weaver, and I'm a senior advisor at Appella Wealth.
And I'm her brother, Sam Morella Sr., Regional Director, also at Appella Wealth. Just one housekeeping item before we get started. We are going to address all the questions at the end of the presentation. Feel free to post those in the Q&A section, the Zoom button at the lower part of your screen. So, what we are going to tell you today, three things. One, how we think differently about long-term care and why long-term care isn't just a money issue, it's a family issue.
Second, we're going to talk about the old school thinking versus the new school thinking about long-term care insurance.
And then we're going to tell you our story. And our story is Deneen's journey caring for our dear mother and what it taught us. So it's not just about the money. However, most conversations about long-term care focus on cost, what it costs, how we're going to pay for it. Money is important, but it's clearly not the whole story.
Long-term care affects not just your finances, but it also affects your family.
So if there's no long-term care plan in place, right or wrong, the family becomes the plan.
So the question becomes, who will take care of you? What is the first line of defense?
So the first line of defense is the healthy spouse. Traditionally, the healthy spouse cares for the infirm spouse. We think that's old school thinking, but it remains very common today. So what we've learned, we've been doing this a long time, is providing care for chronically ill people makes healthy people chronically ill. And this creates new challenges. In our practice, we've seen the healthy spouse predeceased the spouse they were caring for more times than we would certainly like. This is especially common in situations where there's cognitive impairment. What happens in these situations is the infirm sleep schedule becomes disrupted. A lot of times they mix up, they sleep during the day and they're awake at night. No big deal, except the caregiving spouse is often deprived of proper sleep. And over time, the physical and emotional toll becomes catastrophic to the caregiving spouse.
So what will this require from your family? What is the second line of defense?
The children. When the healthy spouse model fails, the children become the caregivers. And a lot of times they're not trained for that. So we're going to use the glide path in our examples our family experienced. Husband gets sick, gets home care, passes on, and then the daughter takes over mom's care regimen, which is statistically the way it works anyway. So what happens is the family caregivers, the daughter in our example, may have to reduce her work hours or, worse yet, leave the workforce. So this can have a significant effect on her current income, her family's current income, and their retirement savings. So what are the consequences to the family from the financial stress of, from not working or working less? That's one consequence. Let's keep in mind the daughter here is also a wife and a mother, and those roles are still immensely important. Marriages can become strained, and we've seen this in our practice. It actually divorces ensue. So, right or wrong, the husband's used to coming home from work, having dinner ready, the house is kept, the kids are taken care of, but now this is disrupted. The children, a lot of times, get less supervision. They're used to mom being home when they come home from school. She gets them to do their homework. They can enjoy the rest of their afternoon and evening. So family stability suffers. So the real issue isn't money, in our humble opinion. It's what can happen when the family becomes the care plan.
We would be remiss if we did not discuss the financial aspect of long-term care. How will the care actually get paid for?
So let's agree, it's expensive. And without long-term care insurance, nothing will pay for care except for assets that are earmarked for retirement or assets that are intended for their heirs. Using those assets usually disrupts their other financial goals.
One of the most important benefits of long-term care insurance is that it provides a currency for the family to pay for the care. This helps protect their other assets, their children's inheritance, and their other income streams.
So how does long-term care insurance help these families for roughly half the people who will eventually need care? It allows them to hire professional caregivers and then spend time being a family instead of full-time caregivers that they're likely not trained to be in the first place. I feel strongly this might be one of the most unselfish gifts parents can give to their family. So everyone's first choice when they need care is to be cared where? At home. Think about it. When you don't feel well, where do you want to be? At your home, in your bed. And that's no different in these scenarios. It's everyone's first choice. And that works well when there's a healthy spouse. But for widows and widowers, a few hours of daily care is rarely enough, forcing many to end up in a facility, which is obviously where they don't want to go. So I had a client come in a couple of weeks ago, and this was a brother taking care of an older widowed sister. And she was adamant she wanted to be cared for at home as it became obvious that she needed some help. So he hired caregivers to come in 4 hours in the morning to get her day off to a good start. It lasted for 2 weeks, and then it became inevitable they had to do something differently. She's now in an assisted living facility, which is not her wish, but it's just the way it has to be.
So let's discuss the old school thinking versus the new school thinking about long-term care insurance. What is the old school thinking?
It's traditional long-term care insurance. And there are three huge frustrations with traditional long-term care. The first is you have to pay premiums the rest of your life. A lot of people are encouraged to and start their long-term care plan in their late 50s or early 60s. So that means that they may pay premiums for 30 plus years. Worse yet, the premiums are not guaranteed. So insurance companies can request rate increases. And how this works is that if an insurance company can prove that they're paying out more in claims essentially than they're getting in premiums, a lot of times the insurance commission will allow them to pass increases onto their policyholders. The sentiment from the insurance commissioner is they'd rather pass those increases along than have the insurance company go out of business. So many policyholders have experienced significant premium increases, in some cases 2, 3, and 4 times. It also happens a lot of times when they're in their 80s. And this creates difficult choices. So what do? Do you walk away from decades of paying premiums, lapse your policy at a point in time where you really need the benefits, you're more likely to need the benefits than ever? Or do you continue paying the much higher premiums? The third frustration, if you don't use it, you lose it. If the benefits are never used, there's no refund. And this use it or lose it design has created many frustrations for the next generation of buyers. They've watched mom and dad. And keep in mind, when we're going through long-term care issues, it's not with our clients, it's with their kids because they're infirmed. And these kids have seen mom and dad pay or know that they've paid for 25 or 30 years, never use the benefits, and the money is lost. I liken it to homeowners insurance that if your house doesn't burn down, you don't get a refund when you sell it.
So, what is the new school thinking?
It's what we call hybrid long-term care. And it was created to solve the weaknesses of traditional policies. It comes in two forms. It's either annuity-based or life insurance-based. So premiums are paid for a set period of time, sometimes funded with a lump sum. A lot of times where we'll set these up is where clients have inherited money and they have access to blocks of money. We'll carve out a piece of that, write one check, and their long-term care plan is paid for. Premiums are guaranteed. There's no future rate increases to be concerned about. And if not used, the money's returned to the family. So if they never need care, the family receives the value back through either the annuity or the life insurance contract that they set up. So buyers know from day one that the funding is finite, payments won't increase, and the money isn't lost if care is never needed. So now we're going to tell you our story. And this is Deneen's journey taking care of mom. We think this is going to be very helpful to you to learn about the things that we experienced over the last few years.
So, let me give you a little background. Our father was a financial planner for many decades. He believed strongly in long-term care insurance and was probably one of their first customers. He purchased a traditional policy for both he and our mom. After Dad passed and we saw what the cost of his care was, we decided to add a hybrid annuity policy for Mom. Dad never used any of the benefits of his traditional policy. He did not last beyond his elimination period. But on the other hand, Mom has used every penny of hers.
So let me give you a little perspective on this. We recognized when Dad passed that it made a lot of sense to supplement Mom's traditional long-term care. Like Deneen said, they were one of the first adopters of this. So their policies didn't have some of the bells and whistles that came later. And we realized that she was at a deficit from this standpoint. So what we did was they had an annuity that we 1035 exchanged into a long-term care annuity. And now this gave her a much broader overall long-term care plan.
The long-term care insurance created a currency that allowed me to build a care plan. But more importantly, it provided me with flexibility. It allowed me to adapt and change the care plan as Mom's needs changed. So stage one, we realized that Mom was not safe living in her home by herself anymore. There were a couple of sets of stairs that were problematic, and she also suffered a fall. So we decided to move Mom into an independent living facility. We felt it was a much better place, had no stairs, but it also provided some social aspects that she no longer had living in her home by herself. She had people to eat meals with. They had activities and programs. There were people there that she knew and developed some friendships. So we thought that this was a much better option.
So to me, the security aspect of it was really paramount. I remember that one time she answered the door with a stranger at the door. And I said, Mom, you can't do that anymore. Unless you know exactly who's on the other side ringing the doorbell, you can't answer it. Because that person now knows that you live alone and you're vulnerable. And one of the things that I tried to do to kind of sell her on this concept of going to independent living facility, I said, Mom, it's like another crack at college. Think about it. It's very similar in a lot of ways. Everybody is at the same stage of life. They have their own space. They can pick and choose the activities they want to do or not do. They can eat with others. They can eat by themselves. And I said, and you might even get to go get to experience it for more than 4 years.
So stage two, mom continued to decline both cognitively and physically, and her cognitive impairment made it increasingly difficult for her to live in the independent living apartment. But the long-term care insurance, it allowed me to bring care into her apartment. We started with a few hours a day, and that eventually increased until we ended up having care there 24 hours a day. We
So
did
let me
this after she sustained another fall.
Yeah. So let me give you a little more, a little bit of perspective here as well. So first of all, her apartment was beautiful. Deneen and my daughter Ashley did everything they could to replicate the home that she had, that she had come from, into the apartment. And we knew it was really nice because the facility would give tours, and they would use my mom's apartment, for the tours to show them how nice the apartment can be. Um, Keep in mind there are 8,760 hours in a year. So around the clock care costs approximately $250,000 a year. Now, our long-term care coverage, or her long-term care coverage, paid roughly half of that. So at this point in the journey, we had to lean on her retirement assets to pay the remainder. But it was much better for mom. She got to remain in familiar surroundings for much longer. So, and with this cognitive impairment comes some interesting conversations, let's say. Out of the blue one day, she says to me, I can't believe my children have kicked me to the curb like this. Now, if she had any idea the effort Deneen made to make this as great of an experience as possible, she obviously just didn't know. And my response to her was, Mom, I don't know what the curb looks like. I can assure you it's not the curb. So were also some emotional challenges. My mom was afflicted with something called sundowners. Maybe it's sundowner syndrome, but sundowners. And what happens at 5 o'clock or when it gets dark, especially in the winter months, it's like she becomes a different person. It's like a switch goes off. Um, she she was such a sweet lady, so kind. All of a sudden, she's agitated, she's competitive, she's disagreeable. Um, One conversation she had with me, she said, Have you seen or talked to Nana, which is her mother? I said, I have not. She goes, Well, why not? I said, Well, she's been dead for 30 years. She would be 116 years old. And she responds, And you didn't tell me? Why didn't you tell me? Now, I have to admit, this wasn't a great response, but it was my response irregardless. I said, Mom, you were at the funeral. I didn't think I needed to remind you. So fortunately, she went on to another thought, still kind of agitated, but she hit me with a couple of other things. And about a half hour later, I needed to leave. And I said, Mom, before I leave tonight, is there anything I can do to make your night better? And she said, Yes, move out of the country. So that's harsh. Now, what's really funny about that is if you knew my family, um, especially my sisters, they're convinced that my brother and I got lifelong preferential treatment. So for my mom to say something like that to one of her sons was so out of character, it's not even funny. But again, this is what you have to deal with in these settings and situation.
Stage three, we we ended up reaching a point where the aides could no longer take care of our mom in her apartment. So we ended up having to move her to a full-time care facility. The long-term care benefits, along with her Social Security, covered her monthly expenses.
Yeah. So because my dad planned ahead, and this is the financial part, his original goal of leaving an inheritance was achieved. But from a family standpoint, Denine's the primary caregiver. I had no idea what that job entailed. I mean, countless phone calls, countless daily decisions, and constant coordination. But the one worry we didn't have is how would we pay for mom's care? What a blessing.
That financial certainty allowed every decision that I had to make to focus strictly on what was best for mom. I didn't have to worry about could we afford to do it. I didn't have to feel like I ever had to cut corners or choose an option that may have been cheaper, but not as good of an alternative for mom. This took away tremendous amounts of stress and pressure to allow me to do the right thing. So let's bring it all together.
So, what we told you, three things. One, how we think differently about long-term care, and that long-term care isn't just a financial issue, it's a family issue, and why the impact on the family really matters. We then discussed old school versus new school funding policies or funding strategies. And then we shared our own family's experience. Our hope is that that story illustrates how proper long-term care planning can protect not only the person receiving care, um, but the spouse, the kids, and the financial aspect of things. We would be happy to answer any questions. Deneen, I can't see. I guess there are some cute questions in the. Let me see here. So, Keith. Okay, I'm going to do this quickly. So Keith asked, just get this set up. Is in-home healthcare 24/7, 3 shifts, cost prohibitive? Yeah, it's really expensive. But when you take the cost out of the mix, and we were able to do that because we had great long-term care protection in our example. And, my dad had built, a portfolio that we can lean on. It wasn't cost driven, like Deneen said. It was motivated, but what's the best for mom? What's the best environment for mom to be cared for? And we decided that was in her apartment, which was her new home, and have aides come in until she became too infirm for them to take care of in the apartment, and then we had to go to a skilled nursing facility.
We tried to prolong that
Yeah,
move to a full-time facility as long as we
yeah,
could.
we got that right. I mean, I think that it wasn't, yeah, she could not have stayed many more days longer than when we made that decision.
Yeah.
When does it make sense to end a policy when rates continue to rise? So in the real world, Stephen, what you can do is you can reduce some of the benefits strategically, to make uh, the premiums either stay the same or not go up nearly as much. So, not to get too long-winded about this, but one of the factors that caused premium increases was the fact when these policies were built, they were based on a 5% or a much higher interest rate environment, and the inflation protection was 5%. So it became very expensive for them to provide 5% per year compounded benefits in a 0% interest rate world. So if you ratcheted down the inflation benefit a little bit, you could elongate the period of time where the rates still made sense to pay. I think that's an individual situation to answer your question kind of more definitively. There's no right or wrong. It's very individualized, and you have to have hard conversations around it. Kirk, my friend Kirk asked, can you talk a little bit about CCRCs? Deneen,
They
that's you.
are called, they're stands for Continuing Care Retirement Community. And that was where my mom was. She was in a continuing care retirement community. It is a facility that has all the different levels of care, and you can transition right from one to the other without with only having to go down the hall, basically.
Yeah,
You start in independent living, then they have an assisted living or personal care. They're pretty synonymous, and they have a skilled care section. They also have a memory care unit. So you have all of the different options right in one community.
good answer. So Kathy and Steve ask, at what level of income do you think would not need long-term care insurance? My favorite three words of an answer are, it all depends. And that's truly the case here. So one of the first times I was introduced to the long-term care concept actually came from a very, very wealthy client. And I said to her, she was asking me about long-term care. And at the point in time, I didn't know a lot about it, didn't have a lot of experience with it. And I asked her a question back. With a little leverage, you could own a nursing home. You're wealthy. Why would you even need this? So she goes, yeah, you don't understand. I don't have kids. My nieces and nephews are going to be in charge of my care. They're also my heirs. And I don't want them conflicted in cheapening my care to protect more of their inheritance. And so that example is nieces and nephews. I can tell you that that transcends to children. And anytime that you have more than one or two, it's very difficult to get them on the same page. And I see it all the time where uh, care is diminished to save money, even though there's plenty of money, um, because the kids want to inherit more money. And you may say that's sad. That I'm telling you, it happens. Denise, do we not see that constantly? And
Yeah.
usually it's evident when they say, we don't need their money. We want them to use their money. That's usually a defense mechanism to we want to inherit as much as we can. So I'm somewhat cynical, but I think that's pretty true. So Kathy and Steve, there are other measures. Um, so it all depends on the circumstances. Um, you know, yes, you have assets, but what are the tax implications to have to carve out money to pay for care? What if you're in a down market and have to sell stocks at a loss or lower prices to pay for care? If you have the currency, that allows those things to not happen. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Andrea, so I have a long-term care I've had for 20 years or so. Would you recommend that I add the hybrid plan now? I'm 72 and healthy. Again, it all depends. Um, I would, if you're asking the question, that means that you should probably take a look at it. I can't say with any conviction that yes, you should. Um, you know, my mom's situation, very similar. We felt, we made the determination, um, that we should add to hers. She was 80, just under the wire. That was the last age you could get the annuity plan that she got. So we got her right under the wire. And who knew just a couple years later she'd be afflicted with cognitive impairments.
And it also would matter what are the benefits on your current traditional policy?
Yeah,
Did it have an
again,
inflation rider? There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and your situation is unique. Talk to your advisor.
yeah. Eric, best age to buy hybrid care. Is there an age you can't get it? Company recommendation. So the age you can't get it any longer is 80. Best age to buy it, I think, is sooner rather than later. Um, but really, when it becomes affordable without taking away from some of the other financial aspects or financial needs. So if your kids are still in college, maybe it's something that you push off a little bit. On the other hand, you might want to do it sooner rather than later so that it's all paid for before you retire. So it all depends on the other circumstances. So there's no cut or dry answer to that. But after 80, you can't get it. Michael says, how old is too old to consider long-term care policies of any type? I would say, again, 80. Just to give you an idea of the plan that my mom has, and it's still available. So my mom and dad had an annuity. So it had a bunch of tax deferred income that was already inside the annuity. And we carved out $120,000 block of money because she qualified for a 3x benefit. So these benefits are paid out over 6 years. And if you do the math, 120 times 3 is 360,000 divided by 72 months. It gave her $5,000 a month of additional benefit. So she was 80 and certainly not too old to consider it. And it unfortunately worked out really well.
There are also medical things to consider because they do qualify you with
Yeah, not everybody gets approved. Not in that case, not everybody gets approved triple, sometimes only double.
yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly other circumstances. Lucinda, can you talk more about where to look into creating a hybrid plan? I think you have to talk to your advisor and have a conversation around the whole long-term care concept. And then they can lead you in the direction of what's best for you. And it very well could be a hybrid plan. Does it make sense to switch from traditional to hybrid? Often not, I would say. I've done it in few circumstances. One I know of which is there was a company that was having really terrible financial problems, and it looked like they could become bankrupt. So what we did is we froze the traditional and then invested in a new hybrid plan to replace what they had, and in that case actually supplement what they had. But I don't think that I'll never say everyone that has traditional needs to switch. The other thing, Steve, are you healthy enough to make the switch? You have to be approved by the hybrid plan to be able to qualify. Lucinda said my parents currently have traditional long-term care. So I think that was a add-on to the question. Can you talk more about looking into creating the plan? So I think the answer is the same there, Lucinda. Talk to your advisor, lay out the scenario, and I think you'll get really good advice on how to proceed. If you have a long-term care policy, do you need to get a hybrid policy? Not necessarily. I think what you have to do is evaluate what you have, evaluate what you need, evaluate the health situation, and recognize that premiums might increase and be prepared for it. And like I said, even though they increase, there's things that you can do. Because I had clients with traditional plans that had 5% compounded benefits. So their benefits of their policy were actually more than they would need today, even if they went to a skilled nursing facility. So we didn't give up those benefits. We just said we don't need 5% from here. We can do with 2%. And that made it so that they didn't even have a premium increase. So it, again, all depends on a bunch of circumstances. Sorry to be vague, but it's the absolute right answer. What reputable companies do you know of that offer this new insurance? One is Forethought, which is Global Atlantic. What are the other?
Curian is Minnesota Life.
Minnesota Life has a great policy. I think it's called it's Securian Life. Those are the two, and then there's a bunch on the
One America.
One America. MoneyGuard is
Lincoln.
Lincoln.
Lincoln Financial Money Guard,
So Lincoln, One America,
Global
uh,
Atlantic,
Global Atlantic, and
Securian Life.
Securian Life. Question, at 79 years old with no long-term care insurance, what is the best way to approach this inevitable situation without depleting all assets and leaving one of the couple homeless and broke? Um, what is the best way to approach it? So I think my answer there is head on. You have to start with assessing the health, and because at 79 you're under the 80, there's options out there for you, but you have to be healthy enough, to qualify. Um, it, if you are healthy enough, then we have to look at where are your assets? Are they in retirement plans? Are they in CDs, in non-qualified accounts? And can we carve out something that you're not using today to live on to protect against that almost inevitable event? Husband and wife, one and two are the averages, so it's likely either husband or wife is going to need care. So I think it's almost, yeah. I think you used the word inevitable. I think that's the right word. What are some reasons why you could pass on long-term care coverage? I think what that question means is why you would not get it. Um, I would say just financial reasons where you can't afford to tie up the money on long-term care, which is not a given. It's a likely, not a given, at the expense of other financial objectives that you have. Or if you're not healthy enough to get coverage, or you would get coverage that was diluted because you're a health risk. I have $1 million policy for my wife and myself. Is that enough? I'm also eligible for some VA long-term care benefits. Do I need to do anything different? I got to tell you, Anthony, that's a great start. Don't know enough about your situation to answer that definitively. Um, and I'm guessing the VA would only cover the one of you that's a veteran. If you're both veterans, then that's even better. But that's a great combination. And I think it would depend on a couple of circumstances, but I got to tell you, that is a really, really good start on solving the problem. Where can we get help in making financial plans to cover a hybrid plan? We are in our 80s and in good health and have a good retirement income, but we're not sure that we plan adequately for long-term care if we should need it. So what gives me pause there is that you're already above. Well, you can still do it at 80, you just can't do it at 81. But if you're beyond 80, you're really handcuffed as to any options, because the insurance companies realize that you are highly likely at some point in time in the relatively near term, meaning 10 to 15 years, to need care, and they're going to pass on that risk. I'm not worried about leaving an inheritance. What kind of plan would you suggest? Okay, again, it kind of all depends. So I think the first thing you have to say to yourself, who is going to take care of
Minister.
you when you need the care? And depending on who that person is, may dictate whether or not you would need long-term care insurance in the first place. Um, so let's say that you have a lot of IRA assets. You can take out over a 10-year period of time a block of money out of the IRAs to pay for a plan that, over a 10-year period of time. If you have a lot of money in CDs, you can carve out a block of that money and solve it with one check. So it's not just the inheritance, though, to answer your question more definitively. It's who's going to who's going to care for you, right? You can likely have a power of attorney. A financial one might be different than the healthcare one, but you're going to have a healthcare power of attorney. Somebody's going to be in charge of this, and depending on their ability to, or their willingness to provide you the best care that you deserve and that you can afford. Um, like I used in the example earlier, if you provide them a currency, they'll spend the insurance company money for sure. Whether or not they spend your money is sometime in conflict. So my wife is not able to get long-term care insurance because her doctor incorrectly mentioned Alzheimer's in her chart. It was not true, but insurance company have denied her permanently. She has zero mental impairment, even with doctors certifying she does not have any mental impairment issues. So without insurance available, what is our plan? So that's just one. I might be wrong about this, but that is just one company's take. I would look at applying to another company. Now, the problem with that, Deneen, is a lot of times they ask you, have you been denied?
They do. It's one of the
Um,
questions.
yeah. So um, also, there are some companies that's kind of like a 1 year penalty box. You know, you're denied in 2026, but you can reapply in 2027. I had a situation where a doctor um, put down osteoporosis instead of osteopenia. And once the insurance company saw osteoporosis, they ran away from that. But a year later, we were able to turn that around. So that may not work in this circumstance, but it's worth a try.
Yeah.
Um, so
Being
without
denied
insurance,
permanently is
pardon me?
that being denied permanently is not encouraging.
Yeah, no.
You would
So
have
his
to try
question is, so
another
without
company.
insurance available, what is our plan? I think that you have to allocate your own assets to be available to cover that potential need. So maybe that means you spend less. Um, you invest certain dollars more aggressively to try to get better returns on it to build up the pool of money that's available for that. So you're going to have to somewhat self-insure, and kind of in a nutshell, you either have to get better returns or try to achieve better returns or save money, don't spend as much money now to leave more money available for that potentiality. And what do you think of options when my parents are 92 and 93? They have assets. Um, so I don't think the legal community will love this answer, but depending on the amount of that, let's say they have a couple of $1 million. And let's say that we would project the cost of them needing care for a 5 year period of time to be $1.25 million. They could gift the $750,000, and as long as um, they they don't run out of money in the ensuing 5 years, not 5 years of when they need care, but 5 years when they make the gift, then those assets aren't touched. Now, the downside to that is they'd have to go on Medicaid. And there's only certain facilities that accept Medicaid patients, and that may not be ideal. But if you've already spent $1.25 million and whatever that $1.25 million has earned over that duration, you should be able to negotiate that you'd be able to stay um, in that place. So I think when you're that age, you have to look at gifting strategies. You can't gift all the money because the government will claw back on it, if because of the 5 year look back. But I've seen clients do that, use that strategy very effectively. Hope that answered that one sufficiently. Are there benefits to paying for skilled care out of pocket versus going through insurance? Um, do the long-term care insurance companies negotiate much lower reimbursement similar to regular insurance? Okay, so that's kind of two questions. Um, Philosophically, if you have long-term care insurance, spend that first, especially if it's traditional, because if you don't spend it, you lose it, and then keep your assets invested and growing. Um, I would suggest to you that I would do the same thing with a hybrid plan. I would spend that first, and because the internal return on the money that's in the hybrid plan is not as good as what you can invest it in a well-diversified portfolio. Um, so the reimbursement question, you know, the way it works is, so if mom's expenses to name were $11,000 a month
12,000 a month.
and her benefits were $10,000 a month, the insurance company, there was no negotiating. They paid the
No,
benefit that she had bought or invested
correct.
in or paid for, and then you took $1,000 a month out of her Social Security, to pay that bill. So health insurance is different. There are
Yes.
some negotiations that go there. In this case, I don't think it really applies.
No. And the facilities are the ones who set their prices. They're not set by anyone else.
Yeah.
And there's no negotiating the price,
Uh,
unfortunately.
Stephen, I think we answered this question. You're admitting to being 80 plus. Does age have an impact? Yeah, it absolutely has an impact on what options that you have. I haven't looked at, I don't think there are options above 80, to be honest with you. Pros and cons of shared benefit policies. Um, so a shared benefit policy this goes back to traditional long-term care. Um, let's say a husband and wife purchase a $5,000 a month benefit that lasts 5 years. So they each have 5 years, but they can pay about a 10% premium, additional premium to get shared care so that they share the 10 years. So if the husband only uses 2 years, then the wife has her 5 and her husband's 3. So what I liked about that was it gives you a higher likelihood of getting more benefit out of the policy that you invested in. The con would be it costs 10% more, which, 10% over 30 years, it's certainly not anything uh, to not consider. I mean, it can add up to be a decent amount of money. I always liked it in most situations because I wanted clients to have the best opportunity to get the most use out of their policy, and shared care offers that. Are there last to die combo plans? That is, can you get a plan that covers either of you who ends up needing it? Uh, yes, both hybrid plans and traditional long-term care plans have the ability to cover both husband and wife. Um, and with the hybrid plans, if neither of you needs it, then the money goes to your children or to your estate, which is an added benefit. I have only taxable retirement funds available to purchase any long-term care, which I have none of now. Taxable retirement funds.
IRA
Can I
assets.
pardon me?
IRA assets.
Okay. Can I transfer these taxable retirement funds tax-free into a long-term care plan? No. The money that comes out of the IRA to pay for them is taxed. The benefit is that the um, long-term care benefits are tax-free. And if you use a life insurance hybrid plan and you die without using it, that estate benefit is tax-free to the kids or to the estate. But you do have to pay taxes on the money you take out of your retirement plan to invest in the long-term care. Just one thing, let's go back to the example that I used for my mom. She had a tax deferred annuities are great assets to target for doing this, by the way. She had a tax deferred annuity that had many thousands of deferred dollars. So we 1035 to tax free into a long-term care annuity with Global Atlantic. So we eat our own cooking. Um, the benefits that she received to pay for her long-term care facility were all tax-free. So we converted tax deferred into tax-free, which was obviously very beneficial.
And there are policies that use IRA assets. It's funded with money out of a retirement account, but it is taxed each year over 10 years as the money comes out of the IRA.
I mean, as far as I can see, that's the last question.
Question.
I can't thank everybody enough for the questions. I love you guys made us think. I love the interaction, and I love hopefully we've been helpful. That's the goal. We put a lot of effort into to this with the goal of being helpful to the very nice people that signed up today. Okay, I'm not sure how we proceed from here.
So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.